You know those stories you hear as a kid, the ones you swear are just legends? Yeah. Some of them have a way of staying alive long after the lights go out. Take the so-called widow's house, for example. It's always been treated like a family secret. More than just old walls, it carries the weight of memories, screams wrapped in silence, and a kind of pain no one dared to name. What makes this place so unique or cursed, depending on how you see it, isn't just its history of sorrow, religious seclusion, and tragic family events. It's the fact that even after generations, the house still feels alive. Or worse, haunted. And not just by ghosts, but by something far more dangerous: guilt. If you've ever felt a chill just from remembering a place or a story that never got closure, then this is for you. This isn't just a horror tale. It's a deep dive into a universe where supernatural encounters, forbidden rituals, youthful rebellion, and collective trauma blend into something disturbingly real. The fear here doesn't come from a shadow in the hallway. It feeds on secrets, on silences, on love turned into curses. And of course, on unforgettable characters like the dreaded Aunt Valentina and the tragic Marta, whose fates are sealed within the moldy corridors of the old house. So brace yourself. What you're about to discover may forever change the way you see what's real and what's not. So do you dare step inside? Since we were kids, we'd hear the adults whisper about a place that should be forgotten: the widow's house. No one spoke of it openly, but the tension in the air was thick whenever someone mentioned that crumbling structure hidden among twisted trees and veiled in mist even on sunny days. The odd thing is, though it belonged to the family, the house was only ever used in emergencies, like there was some unspoken pact keeping everyone away unless it was absolutely necessary. Inside, time seemed to move differently: slower, heavier. And deep down, everyone knew it was guarding something that didn't want to be awakened. A kind of energy that could make even a clock hesitate. Even the name had a weight to it. They said that over the decades, women who had lost their husbands, many while still young, took refuge there. But that refuge came at a price: isolation, strict religious seclusion, and a life ruled by Aunt Valentina, a woman who had become a sort of legend in the family. It was like a convent, but without real faith, just a suffocating kind of grief. Every room seemed to hold a secret, a cursed prayer, or a sob trapped within the walls. The strangest part? No one really knew what went on inside. And maybe that was for the best. The windows? Always shut. The curtains? Heavy, dark, shielding the place from the outside world, maybe to keep something in. Or something else from escaping. Even the few brave souls who dared walk past the front gate would feel that chill run up their spine. That eerie sensation of being watched by someone they couldn't see. It was as if the sorrow of the widows had soaked into the air itself, creating a kind of psychological terror where sanity became a luxury. Some said the floorboards creaked even when no one walked on them. And on moonless nights, the house would sigh. Some say it's all superstition, old stories blown out of proportion by people afraid of their past. But the truth is, everyone knows someone who refuses to ever set foot in there again. The house became a character of its own, present in family conversations, nightmares, and even whispered prayers before bedtime. It was the classic case of the less said, the better, which of course only made it more irresistible to younger generations. Because, let's face it, the forbidden always comes with a certain charm. Since we were little, we'd hear the adults whisper about a place that was better left forgotten: the widow's house. No one ever spoke of it openly, but you could feel the tension in the air every time it came up. Hidden among twisted trees and wrapped in mist even on sunny days, the house was used only in emergencies, like there was some silent agreement to stay away unless there was no other option. Inside, time moved differently. Slower. Heavier. Deep down, Everyone knew that house was guarding something that should never be awakened. Something that made even the clocks hesitate. The name itself carried darkness. Over the years, widowed women, many of them still young, sought refuge there. But refuge came at a price: isolation, religious seclusion, and a strict routine imposed by Aunt Valentina, a woman who'd become a myth in the family. It was like a convent, but without the light of faith, just the weight of pain. Every room seemed to hide a secret, a cursed prayer, a weeping built into the walls. Strangely, no one really knew what went on inside. And maybe it was better that way. The windows were always shut. Heavy, dark curtains blocked any glimpse of the outside world, maybe to keep something inside or stop it from escaping. Even people who just passed in front of the house felt that eerie chill, like invisible eyes were watching. It was as if the sorrow of the widows had soaked into the air, turning the place into a nest of psychological terror where sanity was a rare gift. They said the floors creaked even when no one stepped on them. That on moonless nights, the house breathed. Some say it's just old tales, fear-fed by gossip and imagination. But everyone knows someone who swears they'll never set foot there again. The house became more than a place, it became a character in the family. It appeared in dreams, prayers, and bedtime warnings. One of those things people prefer not to talk about, which only made it more tempting to us younger ones. Because let's be honest, everything forbidden has a certain charm. And it was exactly that curiosity, maybe mixed with a bit of youthful arrogance, that made some of us want to challenge the legend. Ghost stories, collective trauma, whispers of supernatural activity, wanted to see for ourselves. To enter the widow's house and prove it was all just superstition. What we didn't realize was that the moment we stepped through that rusted gate, we weren't just challenging an old tale. We were waking something that had been asleep for far too long. Aunt Valentina was the kind of woman who commanded respect with a single glance. Wealthy, educated, and deeply devout, almost to the point of obsession, she turned the widow's house into a bitter refuge for women who had lost everything. But don't get me wrong, she wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. It was as if she herself carried the weight of a past no one dared to speak about. Her love was tough, buried beneath silence, fasting, and endless prayer. She truly believed that pain had to be lived in silence, purified by penance. Maybe that was her way of keeping the house from swallowing her whole. Over time, Valentina poured her entire fortune into maintaining the house. Everything in that place was deliberate, from the austere furniture to the strict prayer schedule. The widows lived like nuns, but without vows, only marked by loss and an unspoken pact that they would never leave. Those who entered rarely came out. Some were never seen outside their rooms again. It was a place where suffering was recycled, passed down through generations like an emotional curse. The air itself reeked of religious confinement and endless mourning. Valentina believed youth was dangerous. That strong emotions especially leveled to sin. That's why she set strict rules about contact with the outside world, about books, even mirrors. To her, mirrors were vanity, temptation in glass form. Sometimes I wonder if she was trying to erase the identity of those women, like grief needed anonymity to be legitimate. The more daring among us believed Valentina had once loved someone she wasn't supposed to, and that betrayal turned her heart to stone. Maybe that's why she hated desire so much. Or feared it. Still, whispers of witchcraft began to spread through the house. Nothing overt, of course, but there were rumors of Amar's binding spells done by desperate widows trying to resurrect old loves. Valentina tried to fight it with prayers and punishments, but she knew better than anyone that pain could easily turn into something darker. Something faith couldn't contain. And so the house accumulated more than grief, it absorbed that dark energy, that suffering with no escape. Some say the house eventually began to react. Others think the house was just a reflection of Valentina's soul. Even so, it was hard not to respect her. A woman alone, upholding a macabre tradition, protecting her, perhaps controlling the others with an iron grip and ever-watchful eyes. She was the guardian of sorrow, and maybe the only one who truly understood how to keep that place quiet. The question that lingered was, did she really protect the widows from the house or the world from what lived inside them? Because when Valentina passed away, the little order that remained began to crumble. And that's when the younger generation decided to challenge the fear. Every family has that group of cousins who think they're immune to fear, and in our case, that was us. Me, Viridiana, Raoul, and Clarice decided it was time to put an end to the legend of the widow's house. I mean, what kind of family legacy is more about fear than affection? We thought it would be fun. Bring some flashlights, wine, snacks, and spend the night telling ghost stories. The plan was simple: film everything, laugh at the scares, and prove that all this talk of supernatural manifestations was just our older relatives being dramatic. But of course, nothing went as planned. From the moment we stepped past the gate, the air felt heavier. The house was still standing, but everything inside felt frozen in time: furniture covered with sheets, a moldy smell in the air, crooked crucifixes on the walls. Viridiana, ever the skeptic, laughed it off until she stepped into Valentina's old bedroom and felt an unexplainable chill. I swear I heard a door slam on its own, but I told myself it was just the wind. Still, the light mood began to dissolve. The house felt alive, like it was watching us with invisible eyes. We tried to distract ourselves, played cards, joked around, even considered doing a fake spirit session just for laughs. But none of us dared to joke about the house itself. It was like it wouldn't allow it. Our laughter grew softer, our smiles tighter. Raoul, who swore he'd sleep on the living room floor, started carrying his flashlight everywhere. Clarice, who was always fearless, said she heard whispers inside the walls. And that was all before midnight. We didn't know it yet, but we were already being pulled into a web of psychological horror that didn't need jump scares to work. Then the silence turned heavy, too heavy. The house started to breathe with us. The floor creaked in rhythm. Shadows danced with the flicker of our lanterns. Viridiana, in the guest bedroom, swore she felt someone lying next to her in bed. I tried to calm her down, told her it was just her nerves, but the truth? I had felt something in the hallway too. Like we were being tested. Provoked. And at that point, the old legend no longer felt silly. Youthful defiance starts out brave, but it doesn't stand a chance against what it can't understand. Then Clarice found the notebook, old, fragile, filled with religious notes and strange symbols. The pages talked about binding spells, guilt, and souls that don't rest. One page mentioned Marta and fairy names I vaguely remembered from hushed family conversations. Something about a spell gone wrong, a love that turned into disaster. That's when it hit us: we hadn't just poked around in an old house. We had stepped into a full-blown horror story, a place built brick by brick with sorrow. And by then, it was already too late to get out unscathed. Among all the stories haunting the widow's house, the tale of Marta and Ferran was the most whispered and the most feared. Marta was one of the first widows to live there, back when Aunt Valentina enforced the strictest rules. Young, beautiful, and deeply in love, she couldn't accept Ferran's death as final. Her love was just as intense as her grief, and that dangerous mix led her to seek answers in places Valentina's religion would never allow. It said Marta turned to witchcraft, desperately trying to bring Ferran back, or at least stop him from leaving for good. But the spell Marta cast, according to the whispers in the halls, didn't work the way she hoped. Ferran, once a vibrant man, began to wither physically, emotionally, spiritually. It was like his soul was caught between two worlds, yanked by both Marta's love and her despair. With each day, he grew more distant, until he was barely recognizable. Ferran died in Marta's arms, in a pitiful state, drowned in a silence that screamed of a curse. That's when the real punishment began, not just for Marta, but for the entire house. They say Marta never left her room after Ferran's death. She spent her days staring into the mirror, yes, the same kind Valentina forbade if waiting to see him return through the glass. Her sanity slowly slipped away, her body followed. She talked to herself, muttered prayers mixed with spells. Some nights, the other widows heard her laughing softly, or singing songs no one else knew. Guilt devoured her, inch by inch, until she stopped being a person and became a pale echo haunting her own memories. Many say Marta never truly died, she just dissolved into the house. Valentina eventually locked Marta's room, and no one dared to enter it again. Over time, it became the most avoided spot in the widow's house, like it still held the spiritual residue of a love turned into damnation. Those who got close swore they heard muffled cries or smelled floral perfume coming out of nowhere. Ferran, meanwhile, seemed to still wander the hallways, a sorrowful ghost, bound to a fate he never chose. Some believe Marta never meant to harm anyone, she just didn't know how to live with her loss. Others say she unleashed a new era of darkness on the house. But what's most terrifying about Marta's story isn't the spell, it's the universal truth she exposes: what happens when love crosses the line of reason? When grief and guilt become fuel for the impossible. Maybe that's why her legacy is still so alive, especially among the younger ones who dare to mock the legend. The locked room is still there, untouched. And they say, if you whisper Ferran's name 3 times at the door, Marta will whisper back. But be warned, once the house knows you believe it starts to respond. The night wrapped around the widow's house like a heavy cloak, and what had once been silence now felt like breath. None of us could sleep. We were restless, trying not to name the fear aloud. But it was there, spreading through every room with a slow, cruel calm. The air was colder than it should have been, and none of our phones worked. Time started to warp. Every minute stretched endlessly, carrying with it the promise of something invisible that was getting closer. That's when the first paranormal manifestations began, quiet, almost mocking. Viridiana was the first to lose her nerve. She swore there was something under her bed, something not human. At first, we thought she was panicking. But when she screamed a second time, face pale with terror, we all ran to her room. There was nothing there, nothing visible, at least. But the mattress had a clear indentation on one side, like someone or something had been lying next to her. And the strangest part? The floor beside the bed was wet, as if it had just been washed with tears. That was the moment we realized this was way beyond our imagination. After that, the sounds started. First came the footsteps, light but steady, always from the floor above, even though we were all downstairs. Then the knocks, 3 sharp hits against the wall, always at 3 a.m. The house responded to our emotions. If someone panicked, something crashed in the next room. If someone prayed, the noise paused only to return louder. It was as if the structure itself had absorbed the feelings of every widow who had lived there. A collective trauma etched into every wall, every floorboard. Clarice, the most rational among us, broke down. She claimed she kept hearing a woman whispering her name. The terrifying part? The voice was calling her Marta. We didn't get it until we remembered the room she had chosen to sleep in was once Marta's. The same Marta who went mad after Ferran's death. Coincidence? Maybe. But that night left a mark on each of us. Raoul began having recurring nightmares about Aunt Valentina despite never having met her in life. In his dreams, she'd sit in a chair, motionless, clutching a rosary in her bony hands, staring with hollow eyes. We didn't wait for daylight. We ran before the sun came up, without looking back. The front gate groaned behind us like it didn't want us to leave. The horror story we once thought was just a legend had now become part of our reality. And even far from that house, the feeling of being watched didn't leave us. The widow's house had left a mark. And maybe, just maybe, as it often happens with places drenched in guilt, witchcraft, and silence, it left a piece of itself inside each of us. But the worst part? What lives in that house isn't just a spirit. It's an entity made of sorrows that refuse to die. What's strange is that, after everything, the question that lingers isn't what did we see in there, but what did we leave behind? Maybe the answer lies in the very heart of the widow's house. Because contrary to what many believe, the true evil inside that place might not be a ghost, a demon, or an ancient curse. Maybe it's something far more human and much more terrifying. I'm talking about guilt. That corrosive feeling that, when left to rot, becomes something real. In that house, it felt like guilt had taken form. Every unspoken regret, every buried grief breathing, watching. Think about it, dozens of grieving women, locked away, forced to face their own mistakes and losses, with no one to share the weight. The guilt wasn't just personal, it was shared. A collective trauma that seeped through the cracks of the building. Aunt Valentina, for all her strictness, may have tried to contain that energy, to channel it into prayer and silence. But guilt doesn't stay caged. It ferments. It transforms. It becomes something with a will of its own. Something that doesn't fade, even when bodies do. That might explain why the strongest manifestations always happen during moments of personal reckoning. The house didn't just haunt, it reflected. It was a twisted mirror of your own soul. Remember Marta? Maybe her spell was just a trigger. The real curse was what she felt after the guilt of having destroyed the one she loved most. And the widow's house? It simply magnifies those feelings. As if it were made from invisible bricks of regret. Maybe that's why the ghosts never attacked. They didn't want to scare, they waited. Watched. Whispered what we tried so hard not to hear. The guilt wasn't just the fuel behind the hauntings, it was the haunting. It fed on our deepest, unresolved parts. And even after leaving the house, it stuck to us. In dreams. In smells. In memory. Because guilt, when it runs deep, doesn't need walls to live in. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the widow's house still stands. Not because it's structurally sound, but because the pain it shelters hasn't been healed. It's a crooked sanctuary where forgiveness never comes and punishment never ends. A place where guilt becomes supernatural manifestation, where whispers in the dark aren't voices but memories. And hey, race the cruelest twist, everyone has something unresolved. So the only question left is, if you went in, what would the house make you remember? What if the real horror isn't in what we see but in what we refuse to feel? Maybe, deep down, the widow's house is just a symbol of what many of us carry silently: unresolved grief, unhealthy love, and guilt we never name. It's easy to laugh at ghost stories, superstition, or old religious rituals. Much harder is facing what we've buried in our own chests. So ask yourself, are you living in your own haunted house? What memory do you avoid? What feeling do you pretend to forget, even though it tightens your chest in the quiet of night? What does the story of the widow's house with its family tragedies, forced isolation, and cursed romances make you see in your own scars? Guilt is a shadow that walks with us. And unless we turn on the light of awareness, it grows, feeding on everything we don't say or do. So how about starting to look inward, just a little? You don't have to face it all at once. Just one thought. One conversation. One act of forgiveness. Who knows, maybe that's the first step toward making your own house a little lighter. If this story gave you chills, made you think, or stirred something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There are many more stories, reflections, and secrets waiting for you. Because around here fear might knock on the door. But you're the one who decides whether it comes in.